Michael Carter stood in his kitchen in Phoenix, Arizona, staring at his phone. On the screen was a message that said he needed to send $300. It was the same message he saw every month for the past 5 years. $300 to his mother-in-law, Linda. It was money he promised to send before his wife Sarah died. Sarah had cancer. Before she passed away, she made Michael promise something important. Please take care of my mom. She doesn't have much money. Send her $300 every month so she can pay her bills. Michael had kept that promise. Every single month for 5 whole years. That's 60 months. Even when it was really, really hard. But something felt wrong today. Michael's finger just sat there, hovering over the send money button. He couldn't push it. Not yet. You see, Michael didn't have a lot of money. He worked as an electrician, someone who fixes wires and lights in houses. He made okay money, but not great money. And raising his daughter Emma all by himself in Phoenix meant every dollar was important. Emma was 8 years old. She had her mom's beautiful smile. When she smiled, Michael could see Sarah in her face. It made him happy and sad at the same time. Dad! Can we get burgers tonight? Emma ran into the kitchen, still wearing her backpack from school. Her eyes were bright and excited. Michael bent down to look at her. He gently touched her braided hair. How about we make mac and cheese instead? I bought that fancy kind you really like. Emma's smile got a little smaller, but she nodded. She was a smart kid. She had learned not to ask for things that cost too much money. That made Michael's heart hurt more than any bill ever could. Just then, his phone buzzed. A new text message from Linda. We need to talk about the money. Call me tonight. Michael frowned. That was weird. In 5 whole years, Linda had never wanted to talk. She just took the money. She never asked about Emma. She never asked how Michael was doing. She didn't even say thank you most of the time. When Sarah was sick, Linda had acted like she didn't like Michael very much. She was cold to him. She acted like it was somehow Michael's fault that Sarah got cancer. Like Michael's sadness didn't matter because at least he got to keep living. Michael put his phone in his pocket and helped Emma with her homework. But his brain kept thinking about that weird text message. Something felt different. Wrong, maybe? Linda had always wanted the money sent directly to her bank account. At Sarah's funeral, the saddest day of Michael's life, Linda had given him a piece of paper with her bank account information written on it. Her hands were shaking when she handed it to him. Michael thought Linda was shaking because she was so sad about losing Sarah. Now he wondered if maybe she was shaking for a different reason. The handwriting on that paper. Michael had never really looked at it closely before. He was too sad. Too hurt. Too busy trying to figure out how to be both a mom and a dad to Emma. After Emma went to bed that night, Michael did something he hadn't done in a long time. He went to his closet and pulled out a small box. This box held some of Sarah's things that Linda had given him after the funeral. Sarah's wedding ring was in there. Some photos. A hospital bracelet from when she was sick. And at the bottom of the box, there was a business card from the funeral home. On the back of the card, Linda had written a note about picking up Sarah's ashes. Michael looked at the handwriting on that funeral home card. Then he pulled out the old piece of paper with the bank account information. He put them side by side. They didn't match. Not even close. The handwriting was completely different. Like 2 different people had written them. Michael's hands started to shake, just like Linda's hands had shaken at the funeral. But Michael wasn't shaking from sadness. He was shaking because his brain was starting to understand something scary. For 5 years, he had been sending money to honor Sarah's last wish. For 5 years, he had struggled to pay for electricity and food and Emma's school supplies. For 5 years, he had kept his promise. But what if Linda had been lying to him? What if everything he believed was wrong? The bank app on his phone glowed in the dark bedroom. Michael stared at it. For the first time since Sarah died, Michael wondered if he had been sending his money to the wrong place. Or worse, to the wrong person completely. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Michael's best friend Robert showed up at his door super early, 7:30 in the morning. Robert worked at First National Bank in Phoenix. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. Robert had been Michael's friend since they were kids in high school. They told each other everything. So Michael had mentioned the weird text from Linda to Robert yesterday. Now Robert was here, and he looked worried. "I need to tell you something about that bank account you've been sending money to," Robert said. They sat on Michael's front porch. They watched Emma get on the school bus, waving goodbye. Then Robert pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I looked up the account information you gave me," Robert said quietly. "I can't give you all the details because of bank rules, but Michael, something is really wrong." Robert unfolded the paper. "That account gets a lot of money. Way more than what you send. There are deposits of $800, $1,200, sometimes $2,000 every single week." Michael's coffee suddenly tasted bad. His stomach felt funny. "And here's the really weird part," Robert continued. "Every time you send your $300, it gets moved to a different account within 1 day. Like someone is waiting for your money and immediately sends it somewhere else." Michael stared at the paper. All those numbers. All that money moving around. This wasn't an old lady paying her bills. This was something else. Something sneaky. "There's more," Robert said, and he looked even more worried. "The address on the bank account doesn't match what you told me. The account says the person lives at Sunset Apartments on Maple Street, apartment 214. Michael knew that address. "That's not a place for senior citizens," he said slowly. "That's one of those short-term rental places. Where people stay when they're hiding from something." Robert nodded. "And the bank activity goes crazy right around when you send your payment. Like someone knows it's coming and has a whole plan for what to do with it." For 5 years, Michael had never checked. Never visited Linda at her new place. Never asked to see her bills or her apartment. Why would he? Sarah had made him promise. You don't break promises to your dying wife. When Sarah was alive, Linda had her own money. She had been proud. Strong. She didn't like accepting help from anyone. The woman who wouldn't let them buy groceries for her suddenly needed $300 every month. Michael had thought it was weird at the time. But grief, being really, really sad, makes you accept weird things. "I tried calling the phone number you gave me for Linda," Michael admitted. "It always goes to voicemail. Just a robot voice. No name or anything." Robert pulled out his own phone. He typed in Linda's number and searched for it online. His face went pale. "Michael, this phone number isn't registered to Linda Patterson. It's registered to someone completely different." The words hung in the air like smoke. Michael felt cold, even though it was a warm Phoenix morning. Robert stood up slowly. "Man, I think someone has been tricking you. Playing a long game to steal from you." He handed Michael a business card. "This is Daniel Martinez. He's a private investigator who specializes in finding people who steal money. You need someone who knows how to trace money legally." Robert paused at the porch steps. His face was super serious. "One more thing. That bank account has been getting payments from at least 4 other places. Monthly payments, just like yours. Different amounts. You might not be the only person getting scammed." As Robert's car drove away, Michael sat alone. The papers were spread across his lap. The numbers told a story he didn't want to believe. Somewhere in Phoenix, someone was collecting money from multiple people. Using Linda Patterson's name. Using Michael's grief, his sadness about losing Sarah, as a tool to steal from him. The woman who raised Sarah, who held Michael's hand at the funeral, who accepted his promise to take care of her, that woman might not exist anymore. Or maybe she was part of the trick. The morning sun felt cold on Michael's skin as he realized something terrible. He had been sending money to a ghost for 5 whole years. Michael spent the whole weekend thinking about what Robert had told him. But on Monday morning, he was ready to find the truth. He drove across Phoenix to Sunset Apartments. It was between a laundromat where people washed clothes and a check-cashing place. This didn't look like somewhere Linda would live. Linda liked nice, quiet neighborhoods with gardens. Michael walked into the building manager's office. His name was Pete. Pete was a tired-looking man who barely looked up when Michael walked in. "I'm looking for my mother-in-law," Michael said, trying to sound calm. "Linda Patterson. I think she might live in apartment 214? Pete pulled out a big book with all the apartment information. "Apartment 214. Yeah, same person has been renting it for 3 years now. Quiet tenant. Pays on time. Never causes trouble." Michael felt hopeful. Maybe Linda really did live here. But then Pete said something that made Michael's whole world spin. "But it ain't no Linda Patterson. The name on the lease is Sarah Carter." The room felt like it was tilting. Michael grabbed the counter to steady himself. Sarah Carter. That was his wife's name. His dead wife's name. "The lady is maybe in her mid-30s. Pete continued, not noticing that Michael had gone completely still. "Keeps weird hours sometimes, but she's a good tenant." Can I see the security camera footage?" Michael asked. His voice sounded strange, even to himself. "From the lobby? Just to make sure this is the right person." Pete shrugged. "Can't let you take copies, but I can show you on the screen." They went to Pete's small office. There was a grainy TV screen showing the apartment lobby. Pete scrolled backward through the recordings, showing different people coming and going. Then Michael saw her. A woman walked through the lobby. She moved in a way that Michael knew. He had watched that walk for 10 years of marriage. The way she checked her phone while walking. The way she tilted her head. When she turned toward the camera, Michael's heart stopped. The face was older. Thinner. Her hair was shorter and darker than before. But those eyes, those were Sarah's eyes. That was Sarah's face. "That's her," Pete said casually. "Sarah Carter. Lives alone, mostly. Gets visitors sometimes." Michael stared at the timestamp on the video. 3 days ago. 3 days after he had sent another $300 payment. The woman who made him promise to take care of her mother was apparently alive. Living under her own name. Collecting payments meant for someone else. Pete showed him more footage from the past month. Sarah entering and leaving the building. She looked healthy. Happy even. Nothing like the sick, dying woman he remembered from 5 years ago. In one video, she was carrying fancy grocery bags from expensive stores. In another, she was dressed up nice, laughing on her phone. This wasn't someone hiding from an illness. This was someone living a completely different life. While Michael struggled to keep the lights on and buy food for Emma, the security videos showed something else too. A man appeared in several clips with Sarah. He put his hand on her back like boyfriends do. Michael didn't recognize him. They looked like a couple. Comfortable. Like they'd been together for a long time. In the most recent footage, Michael noticed something that made him feel sick. Sarah's stomach was bigger. She was pregnant. Going to have a baby. She was building a new family while Michael sent money to support the lie of her death. Michael thanked Pete and walked to his truck. His legs felt wobbly. The drive home was a blur. He couldn't think straight. Sarah was alive. His wife. Emma's mother. The woman he had cried over for 5 years. The woman he still dreamed about sometimes. She was living 20 minutes away from their house. She was healthy. Happy. Pregnant with some other man's baby. And she was collecting his money through an elaborate trick involving her mother. That night, after Emma was asleep, Michael sat with the private investigator's business card that Robert had given him. Daniel Martinez answered on the second ring. "I need to hire you," Michael said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "My wife faked her death 5 years ago. I've been sending money to support her lie ever since." Daniel listened as Michael explained everything. The security footage. The lease in Sarah's name. The monthly payments that kept him struggling while Sarah built a new life. "This is more common than you'd think," Daniel finally said. "People faking their deaths. Insurance fraud. Disappearing acts. The hard part is getting evidence that will hold up in court. Daniel's voice got more serious. If what you're telling me is true, we're looking at multiple crimes. Wire fraud, that's stealing money through banks. Insurance fraud. Identity theft. These are serious crimes. The question is, Daniel continued, do you want to expose this just to know the truth? Or do you want to press charges? Have her arrested? Michael stared out his kitchen window at the Phoenix neighborhood where he'd raised Emma alone. Where he'd struggled to pay bills while honoring a dead woman's wishes. The answer came easier than he expected. He wanted the truth. All of it. And he wanted the people who stole 5 years of his life to face consequences. The woman on that security footage wasn't the wife he'd mourned. She was a stranger who had weaponized his love, turned his love into a weapon against him, for profit. That stranger was about to discover that Michael Carter was done being anybody's fool. Daniel Martinez arrived at Michael's house on Wednesday evening. He carried a thick manila folder full of papers. The private investigator spread documents across Michael's kitchen table with careful precision. Each paper represented another crack in the lie Michael had believed for 5 years. The first document hit the hardest. Your wife was discharged from Phoenix General Hospital on March 15, 2019. Daniel pointed to a hospital paper. Alive. Stable condition. Released to family care. Michael stared at the paper. March 15, 2019. That was 3 days before Sarah supposedly died. The interesting part is who signed for her release. Daniel pulled out another document. Linda Patterson. Listed as legal guardian because the patient, Sarah, was having emotional distress and couldn't make her own medical decisions. Daniel slid another paper across the table. But here's the death certificate filed the same day at a different hospital across town. Signed by a doctor who had his medical license suspended 2 months later for lying on records. Michael felt like he couldn't breathe. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was planning. Coordination. Multiple people working together to erase Sarah Carter from existence while keeping her alive to profit from his grief. The cremation records are even more interesting. Daniel continued. He opened another folder. Sunset Funeral Home has no record of cremating Sarah Carter on the date in your paperwork. But they did cremate an unidentified woman the same day. A Jane Doe, someone with no name, from the county morgue. Paid for in cash by someone anonymous. Daniel paused to let that sink in. The urn you were given, it contains the ashes of a complete stranger. Your wife's mother handed you some random woman's remains and called it closure. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed to be closing in. Michael walked to the box of Sarah's belongings, the one Linda had given him after the funeral. He dumped everything onto the table. The wedding ring. Too small for the fingers Michael remembered. A medical bracelet from a hospital stay Michael had never heard about. Photos of them together that looked somehow wrong. Like someone had replaced real memories with fake ones. Every single thing he had treasured as a connection to his dead wife was revealing itself as part of an elaborate trick. Daniel examined each item like a detective. The wedding ring is fake. Gold-plated. Worth maybe $20. The real one probably got sold years ago. He held up the medical bracelet. This is from a hospital in Miami, Florida. Not Phoenix, Arizona. The photos were next. These were printed on photo paper that wasn't made until 2021. That's 2 years after she supposedly died. Michael sank into his chair. The weight of the betrayal crushed down on him like a building collapse. Every memory he'd cherished. Every moment of grief he'd worked through. Every promise he'd kept to honor her legacy. All of it had been manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit his love. There's more, Daniel said, pulling out a final document. Life insurance payout statement. $50,000 paid to Linda Patterson 4 months after the supposed death. Sarah changed the beneficiary from you to her mother 3 days before the staged death. The paperwork cited marital difficulties. Michael had never heard about any marital difficulties. Their marriage had been solid. Their future was planned. Their love was genuine, at least on his part. Apparently, Sarah had been planning her escape, while Michael had been planning their anniversary celebration. $50,000 was enough to start over. Relocate. Fund a new identity while maintaining the old one for monthly income from multiple victims. But why? Why would someone who claimed to love him choose this psychological torture over an honest conversation? Why would Linda collaborate in destroying the man who tried to care for her daughter's child? Money was the obvious reason. But the cruelty felt personal. Designed to inflict maximum emotional damage over the longest possible time. Daniel closed the folder with finality. Tomorrow, I'm recommending we contact the FBI. This crosses state lines, she's in Florida now. It involves federal wire fraud. This represents an ongoing criminal enterprise. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen similar cases before. But I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared for what comes next? Daniel looked Michael straight in the eyes. Once we expose this, there's no going back to the comfortable lie. Emma is going to learn her mother is alive and chose to abandon her. Your community is going to know you've been supporting a fraud. And Sarah is going to face federal charges that could put her in prison for decades. Michael looked around his kitchen. At the home he'd maintained alone. At the photographs of Emma he'd hung to fill the emptiness left by fake grief. For 5 years, he'd lived in a carefully constructed prison of obligation and loss. Sending money to support a lie while struggling to raise his daughter with dignity. The woman who created this prison was 20 minutes away. Pregnant with another man's child. Building a life funded by his sacrifice. The choice Daniel was offering wasn't really a choice at all. It was a chance to reclaim reality, whatever the cost. Schedule the meeting with the FBI, Michael said. His voice was steady for the first time in years. I want them to know that Michael Carter isn't anybody's fool anymore. The decision felt like turning on the lights after working in darkness. Seeing corners of his life that had been shadowed by manufactured grief. Tomorrow would bring federal agents, criminal charges, and the systematic dismantling of an elaborate fraud. Tonight, Michael Carter was finally ready to stop mourning a woman who never bothered to die. Michael made a decision on Thursday morning. His finger hovered over the send money button like a man carefully cutting a dangerous wire. $300 stayed in his account for the first time in 60 straight months. Instead of the familiar confirmation message his phone showed, transfer cancelled by user. The words felt like the first honest thing he'd done in 5 years. Now came the waiting. The response came at 11:30 with a call from Linda's number. The first time she'd called him in months. Michael let it ring 4 times, giving Daniel Martinez's recording equipment time to capture every word. Hello, Linda, Michael said. His voice was calm. The woman on the other end sounded completely different. Sharper. More urgent. Gone was the sad, grieving mother act she'd maintained for years. Michael, there's been some mistake with the bank transfer. Linda's words tumbled over each other. I've been checking my account all morning and the money didn't come through. I need you to call the bank and fix whatever went wrong. You know I depend on that money for medications, rent, everything. The desperation was real. But Michael recognized it now as the panic of someone whose carefully constructed scheme was falling apart. I'm having cash flow problems this month, Michael replied, following the script he and Daniel had practiced. Emma needed emergency dental work, and the electric bill was higher than expected. I'll try to send something next week. Maybe half the usual amount. Silence. Long enough for Michael to hear traffic in the background. Street noise that didn't match the quiet residential area where Linda supposedly lived. You can't just stop sending money without warning. Linda's voice had transformed from weak elderly woman to something harder. More calculating. Sarah made you promise to take care of me. That means every month, the full amount. Her voice got even more intense. If you're having money problems, get a second job. Take out a loan. I don't care what you have to do, But that money needs to be in my account by tomorrow or there's going to be consequences. What kind of consequences? Michael asked. He was genuinely curious how far she would take the act. Linda's breathing grew heavier. When she spoke again, her voice carried desperation that made people say things they'd later regret. Sarah told me things about you before she died, Linda said in a mean whisper. Things about how you treated her. How you made her feel trapped in that marriage. If you don't keep sending that money, I might have to share those stories with people. With your work. With Emma's school. With anyone who thinks Michael Carter is such a good man. Blackmail. She was trying to blackmail him. The attempt was pathetic and transparent. But it revealed something important. Linda was running out of options. That's interesting, Linda, Michael said calmly. Because I've been wondering about something myself. He let the pause stretch out. I drove by your old address last week. The one I've been sending money to. Funny thing, the people living there say no Linda Patterson has ever received mail at that location. They'd been forwarding packages to a different address for 3 years. Want to explain that? The phone went dead. Complete silence. The call had ended. Michael looked at his screen to confirm, then immediately called Daniel Martinez. She hung up as soon as I mentioned the address. Michael reported. But not before threatening blackmail and demanding I take out loans to keep sending money. Did you get all that? Daniel confirmed the recording was perfect. Then he delivered news that made Michael's pulse quicken. FBI is very interested. Agent Lisa Wong from the White Collar Crime Division wants to meet tomorrow morning. Daniel's voice carried professional satisfaction. Between the insurance fraud, fake death certificate, wire fraud across state lines, and now attempted extortion, they're looking at a potential RICO case. This isn't just about you anymore, Michael. They think your wife and her mother are part of a larger operation. An organized crime ring targeting grieving spouses. The scope was expanding beyond Michael's personal betrayal. This was threatening other families. Other widowers struggling to honor promises made to people who would weaponize their love. That afternoon, Michael picked up Emma from school and took her for ice cream. Something they couldn't usually afford, but he suddenly felt compelled to do. She talked about her day, her friends, her upcoming science project. Completely unaware that her world was about to change in ways Michael couldn't yet explain. Looking at her face, so much like Sarah's, but innocent of the calculation that had marked her mother's final years, Michael felt the weight of his choice. Emma would learn the truth eventually. But for now, she could finish her chocolate cone in peace. His phone buzzed with another call from Linda's number. Michael let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then a text. We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Papago Park by the lake. Come alone. The desperation was obvious. But so was something else, a tone suggesting Linda was ready to play cards she'd been holding in reserve. Michael forwarded the message to Daniel, then typed his response. I'll be there. Tomorrow would bring federal agents, recorded conversations, and the beginning of the end for a fraud that had stolen 5 years of his life. But tonight Michael Carter sat in his kitchen with his daughter, feeling genuinely hopeful about the future for the first time since he believed his wife had died. The trap was set. And he was no longer the prey. #My wife died years ago. Every month I sent her mom $300. Until I found out. Papago Park stretched along the edge of Phoenix like a desert oasis. Its walking paths were dotted with people jogging and enjoying the crisp Friday afternoon. Michael arrived early, positioning himself on a bench where he could see everything clearly. Daniel Martinez's surveillance team blended into the scenery. Some looked like joggers, others like people having picnics. No one would know they were actually FBI agents and investigators. The wire taped to Michael's chest felt strange. It was a recording device that would capture everything Linda said. Michael had worn electrical equipment for work before, but this felt different. Heavier. More important. 5 years of lies were about to collapse, and Michael intended to control how it happened. Linda Patterson appeared at exactly noon. She walked quickly, like someone much younger than her supposed age. Gone was the frail, weak elderly woman from Sarah's funeral. This woman moved with purpose and energy. She wore dark jeans and a leather jacket that looked expensive, way more expensive than what someone on Social Security should be able to afford. Her eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the area like someone who knew she might be walking into a trap. "You look good, Linda," Michael said as she got closer. "Younger somehow. Must be all that Florida sunshine Daniel told me about." He watched her face change from fake friendliness to something harder when she realized he'd been investigating her. She sat down, but kept her distance. Her purse was clutched tight, like she was ready to run if she needed to. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, Michael," Linda said. Her voice carried none of the weakness he'd grown used to. "But you're playing with things you don't understand. That money you've been sending? It's not just about me. There are other people involved. People who don't appreciate some electrician thinking he's smarter than he actually is." Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The implication was clear. This wasn't just about Linda and Sarah anymore. This was about a network. A group of criminals who preyed on grief and turned love into profit. The recording device suddenly felt like the most important equipment he'd ever carried. It was capturing evidence that could protect not just him, but other victims he'd never met. "Tell me about the other people, Linda," Michael said, keeping his voice steady. "Tell me how this really works." Linda's laugh was bitter. She opened her purse and pulled out a cigarette. "You want the truth? Fine." She lit the cigarette. "Your precious Sarah came to me 6 months before she supposedly died. Crying about feeling trapped. Wanting out but not wanting to hurt you or lose Emma." Linda took a drag from her cigarette. "I told her about a friend who'd helped other women disappear from situations they couldn't handle. Clean breaks. New identities. No messy divorces or custody battles. Just gone, like they never existed." Michael's fists clenched, but he kept his voice level. "At first, it was supposed to be simple," Linda continued. "Fake the death, collect insurance money, disappear forever. But then Sarah got greedy." Linda's voice mixed admiration and disgust. "She said if she was going to be dead anyway, why not stay dead and collect money from multiple sources? She'd studied you for 10 years, Michael. She knew exactly how to push your buttons. Make you feel guilty enough to support her mother forever." Linda flicked ash between them. "The monthly payments were her idea, not mine. She said you'd never stop sending money as long as you believed it was what she would have wanted." Michael's hands shook with anger, but his voice stayed calm. "And the other victims? How many families are you destroying with this scheme?" Linda took another drag. Her eyes were fixed on the distance, like she could see escape routes if she needed them. "Enough to make it profitable," she said with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather instead of ruining lives. "Grieving spouses are easy marks. They're desperate to honor promises. Prove their love meant something." She continued. "We've got 3 operations running in different cities. Maybe 15 active income streams at any given time." She flicked more ash. "Your wife is in Miami now. Pregnant with some real estate developer's baby. She sends me 20% of whatever she collects from you and 2 other men who think they're supporting their dead wives' relatives." Linda smiled coldly. "It's a beautiful system. Really clean. Sustainable. Virtually impossible to trace." The confession hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't just personal betrayal. This was organized crime. Systematic exploitation of human grief with reach into multiple states and dozens of lives. The woman beside him wasn't just his former mother-in-law. She was a criminal who had turned his love for Sarah into a business model. "There's just one problem with your beautiful system, Linda." Michael stood slowly. "It's built on a foundation that can't support the weight of what you're trying to carry." He gestured subtly toward the surveillance team positioned throughout the park. "And sometimes when you overload a circuit, the whole thing burns down." Linda's eyes went wide as she spotted FBI agents emerging from concealed positions. Their badges glinted in the afternoon sun like warning lights. She dropped her cigarette and reached for her purse, but Michael's hand closed over her wrist with the firm grip of someone who'd spent years working with live electrical current. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said quietly. "You've done enough damage for one lifetime." As Agent Lisa Wong approached with handcuffs ready, Michael Carter felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years: the solid satisfaction of a job completed correctly, with all dangerous connections finally severed. 3 months had passed since Linda's arrest in Papago Park. 3 months of FBI investigations that had unraveled a fraud network spanning 4 states and devastating dozens of families. Today, Michael sat in the witness waiting room at the federal courthouse in downtown Phoenix. He wore his best suit, pressed and clean. His testimony was rehearsed. Through bulletproof glass, he could see news vans lining the street like predators waiting for a story. Agent Lisa Wong entered the waiting room with professional satisfaction. The FBI's investigation had been thorough and devastating. They traced financial records, fake death certificates, and insurance payouts across multiple states. "We've got them cold, Mr. Carter," Agent Wong said. "The evidence is overwhelming. Linda's cooperation has given us everything we need to prosecute the entire operation." The cooperation hadn't come easily. Linda had spent 2 weeks in federal custody before agreeing to testify against her partners in exchange for a reduced sentence. The network, she'd revealed, was larger than anyone had imagined. 17 active cases across Arizona, Florida, Texas, and California. Victims sending monthly payments to support relatives who were either actually dead or had never existed at all. Michael's case had become the keystone, the most important piece, that brought down an entire criminal enterprise built on weaponized grief. "Your wife was arrested yesterday at her apartment in Miami," Agent Wong continued. "Sarah Carter, also known as Sarah Martinez and Sarah Johnson, depending on which identity she was using with which victim. She's been charged with federal wire fraud, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and identity theft." The pregnancy had complicated the arrest, but Sarah was now in federal custody, awaiting trial. The image of Sarah in handcuffs, pregnant with another man's child while facing decades in federal prison, should have brought Michael satisfaction. Instead, it just felt like the end of something that should have ended years ago. The courtroom was packed when Michael took the witness stand. Every seat was filled with victims, family members, reporters, and law enforcement officials who'd worked the case. Judge Patricia Morales presided with stern authority. Her experience with financial crimes was evident in how efficiently she managed the proceedings. Michael's testimony was clinical, factual, stripped of the emotional weight that had carried him through 5 years of unknowing victimization. He recounted the monthly payments, the suspicious transactions, the security footage that had revealed his wife's continued existence. Across the courtroom, Linda Patterson sat at the defense table looking older than her 67 years. Gone was the confident woman from Papago Park. This was someone who understood the weight of federal charges. She wore an orange jumpsuit. Her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear as Michael described how she'd exploited his grief. When their eyes met, Michael saw no remorse. No recognition of the damage she'd caused. Just the cold calculation of someone who viewed other people's pain as a business opportunity. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Carlos Rodriguez, walked Michael through the evidence with practiced precision. Bank records showing $18,000 in payments over 5 years. Insurance documents revealing the $50,000 payout that had funded Sarah's new life. Hospital records proving she'd been discharged alive the same day she'd supposedly died. Phone records connecting Linda to a network of conspirators across 4 states. Each piece of evidence built toward an inescapable conclusion. Michael Carter had been the victim of an elaborate, ongoing criminal conspiracy. "Mr. Carter," Rodriguez asked during direct examination, "what impact did this fraud have on your family's financial situation?" Michael looked toward the gallery where Robert sat with Emma. His 8-year-old daughter still believed her mother had died of cancer. The truth would come eventually, but for now, she was just proud of her father for helping catch the bad people. "I struggled to pay basic bills while sending money to support what I believed was my obligation," Michael testified. I delayed necessary repairs to our home. Postponed my daughter's medical care. Worked overtime constantly to meet the financial commitment I thought I owed. Michael's voice was steady. The $18,000 I sent over 5 years represents money that should have gone toward my child's future. Toward building stability for our family. Instead, it funded a lie that kept me trapped in grief while the woman I'd mourned built a new life with my money. The defense attorney tried to paint Michael as someone who never bothered to verify where his money was going. But her arguments fell flat against the mountain of evidence Rodriguez had presented. The jury saw through her attempts to shift blame. They recognized Michael as what he was, a man whose love and sense of duty had been weaponized against him by people who viewed human decency as weakness to be exploited. When sentencing came 2 weeks later, Judge Morales delivered justice with clarity Michael had been waiting 5 years to hear. Ms. Patterson, you have participated in one of the most cruel and calculated schemes this court has encountered, the judge said. You preyed upon people in their most vulnerable moments, turning their love into profit and their grief into a commodity. Linda received 15 years in federal prison. Her age ensured she'd spend most of her remaining life behind bars. Sarah's sentencing would come later, after the birth of her child and her own trial in Florida. But the charges she faced, multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft across state lines, carried a potential sentence of 30 years. The woman who'd faked her death to escape her responsibilities would spend the better part of her real life paying for that choice. Michael felt no satisfaction in her fate. Only the relief of knowing she could never again turn someone's love into their financial prison. Outside the courthouse, Michael stood with Agent Wong and Carlos Rodriguez. They watched as news crews interviewed other victims whose cases had been solved because of his decision to fight back. Families from Texas, Florida, and California had flown to Phoenix to witness the end of a network that had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who trusted in the basic human obligation to care for the grieving. Michael Carter had started this journey trying to honor what he thought was his wife's final wish. He was ending it having helped protect dozens of other families from the same systematic cruelty. A reporter approached Michael as he walked to his truck. "Mr. Carter, how do you feel now that justice has been served?" Michael thought about the question. About 5 years of struggle. About Emma growing up without a mother because that mother had chosen to disappear. About all the other victims who'd been freed from similar prisons of manufactured obligation. "I feel like I can finally breathe," he said simply. "And I hope other people who are going through something similar will know that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to verify. Love shouldn't make you blind, it should make you careful about who you trust with your heart and your resources." As he drove home, Michael thought about how much had changed since that morning he'd hesitated over the send button. The decision to question. To investigate. To fight back. That decision had freed not just him, but dozens of other families. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But they would be honest challenges. Real problems, not manufactured ones designed to exploit his grief. And that made all the difference. 6 months after the trial, Michael Carter stood in his renovated kitchen, watching Emma arrange fresh flowers in the vase they'd bought at the Phoenix Farmers Market. The $18,000 recovered through federal asset forfeiture had transformed their modest home into something that felt like possibility rather than survival. New appliances hummed efficiently. The electrical system he'd rewired himself no longer sparked dangerously. And Emma's college fund finally had a balance that suggested dreams might be achievable. The weight of manufactured obligation had lifted, replaced by authentic responsibility to the daughter who looked at him with uncomplicated love. The hardest conversation had come 3 months earlier when Emma's questions about the bad people on the news evolved into harder truths about her mother's choices. Michael had prepared for anger, confusion, emotional devastation requiring years of therapy. Instead, his 8-year-old had listened with a resilience that amazed him. Then she'd asked if this meant they could finally get the dog they'd always talked about but never afforded. Children possessed wisdom about moving forward that adults often lost in the complexity of looking backward. Sunday dinner had become a tradition with Robert and his girlfriend Maria. chosen family that mattered more than blood relations. They'd learned that happiness was something you built deliberately rather than something that happened accidentally. Michael's promotion to electrical supervisor came with a 20% salary increase and respect from colleagues who'd watched him handle catastrophe with quiet dignity. The man who'd once struggled with monthly bills while supporting a lie now managed budgets with the confidence of someone who'd learned the difference between duty and manipulation. It's funny how much easier work becomes when you're not carrying around someone else's deception, Michael told Robert over pot roast one Sunday. The meal actually included vegetables this time, luxuries he no longer had to calculate against fictional obligations. Freedom from manipulation feels like breathing clean air after years in smoke, Michael continued. Everything becomes clearer, more manageable, genuinely my own. The follow-up story about the fraud network had featured interviews with other victims whose lives had been rebuilt after prosecution. 12 families recovered significant damages. 3 women discovered their supposedly dead husbands were alive under assumed names. The network's total theft exceeded $400,000, all extracted from people whose only crime was loving someone enough to honor their memory. Sarah's sentencing had been delayed by her son's birth, but federal charges remained unchanged. 22 years in prison after cooperating against other network members. She'd be past 50 when released. The child would grow up knowing his mother as a convicted felon rather than the grieving widow she'd pretended to be. Michael felt no satisfaction in her fate. Only quiet relief knowing she could never again turn someone's love into their financial prison. "Dad, can we watch a movie?" Emma bounced onto the porch with the energy of a child who'd spent the day playing rather than worrying about adult complications. Her latest obsession was animated films about characters overcoming impossible obstacles through cleverness and determination. Themes that resonated with Michael's journey from victim to survivor to protector of others. They'd developed Sunday movie night traditions, complete with popcorn and commentary that made simple stories feel significant. As they settled into the living room, Emma curled against Michael's side with the unconscious trust of a child who never doubted her father's love, even when that love had been exploited. The movie played, but Michael's attention drifted to the framed photos on the mantel. New pictures of them at the Phoenix Zoo. At the Arizona Science Center, where Emma had won second place with a project about electrical circuits that made him call Robert at midnight with the news. The old photos were gone, the carefully staged memories designed to manipulate rather than commemorate. In their place were authentic moments that felt solid in ways the previous collection never had. These were images of a life rebuilt on truth rather than constructed on lies. When the credits rolled, Emma had fallen asleep against his shoulder. Michael carried her to bed, tucking her under covers in the room they'd redecorated together. Walls painted her favorite purple. Shelves lined with books about girls who solved problems and boys who built impossible things. Tomorrow would bring ordinary challenges of single parenthood. Helping with homework. Packing lunches. Making sure she brushed her teeth. But none felt overwhelming anymore. He'd learned the difference between genuine responsibility and manufactured guilt. And that knowledge had set him free. The monthly $300 now went into Emma's college fund, earning compound interest instead of funding elaborate lies. Every month, when Michael made that transfer, he felt genuine satisfaction instead of the hollow obligation that had marked those previous 5 years. Michael Carter had spent 5 years mourning a woman who never died. Supporting obligations that had never been real. Carrying guilt that had never been his to bear. Now he was simply a father who loved his daughter. An electrician who took pride in his work. A man who'd learned that choosing yourself wasn't selfish. It was the foundation that made choosing others possible and meaningful. As he stood on his porch that evening, watching the Phoenix sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Michael thought about all the other victims out there. People still trapped in similar schemes. Still sending money to support lies they didn't know existed. The FBI had set up a hotline after the trial. A number people could call if they suspected similar fraud. Michael had done 3 interviews with local news stations, sharing his story in hopes that someone else might recognize the warning signs. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling, he'd said in the interviews. If the story doesn't add up, ask questions. Verify. Investigate. Love shouldn't require blind faith, it should be built on truth and transparency. His phone rang. An unknown number. Mr. Carter? This is Janet Wilson from Tucson. I saw your interview on the news. I think I might be in the same situation you were in. My husband died 3 years ago, and his brother has been asking for monthly payments. But some things aren't adding up. Michael sat down on his porch steps, ready to listen. Ready to help someone else escape the trap he'd been caught in for so long. This was the real legacy of his ordeal. Not just his own freedom, but the ability to help others find theirs. As he talked Janet through what to look for, what questions to ask, what evidence to gather, Michael realized something profound. The worst thing that had ever happened to him, Sarah's betrayal, the years of manipulation, the financial struggle, had given him the tools and knowledge to help protect others from similar fates. Pain had been transformed into purpose. Victimization had evolved into advocacy. And the man who'd once been too grief-stricken to question anything was now helping others learn that questioning wasn't betrayal, it was wisdom. After an hour on the phone with Janet, Michael hung up and called agent Lisa Wong. She'd want to know about this potential case. The sun had fully set now. Phoenix lights twinkled across the valley like stars brought down to earth. Emma appeared at the door in her pajamas. Dad? You coming inside? Yeah, sweetie. I'm coming. Michael took one last look at the city he called home. The place where his life had fallen apart and been rebuilt stronger than before. Tomorrow, Janet Wilson would call the FBI hotline. An investigation would begin. Maybe another network would be uncovered. Maybe more families would be freed. But tonight, Michael Carter was just a dad putting his daughter to bed. Reading her a story about brave kids who solved mysteries and caught bad guys. When he closed the book, Emma looked up at him with serious eyes. Dad? I'm proud of you. For catching the people who were being mean and stealing from families. Michael felt his throat tighten. I'm proud of you too, Em. For being so strong through all of this. Are we going to be okay? She asked. A question that carried more weight than her 8 years should have to bear. Yeah, baby, Michael said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be great. As he turned out her light and closed the door, Michael reflected on the journey. 5 years of sending $300 to support a lie. 5 years of struggle and sacrifice. 5 years of grief for someone who never bothered to die. But those 5 years had taught him something invaluable. The capacity to love deeply didn't make you weak. The willingness to honor commitments didn't make you a fool. What made you vulnerable was staying in those places when evidence suggested something was wrong. What made you a victim was refusing to question when your instincts screamed that something didn't add up. Michael had learned to trust his instincts. To ask hard questions. To demand truth even when lies were more comfortable. And in doing so, he'd freed not just himself, but dozens of other people from similar prisons. The monthly $300 had been a prison sentence, 60 months of payment to support a fraud. But it had also been the thread that, when pulled, unraveled an entire criminal network. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us contain the seeds of the best things we'll ever do. Michael Carter understood that now. And as he settled into his own bed, in his own home, with his daughter safe down the hall and his bank account finally his own, he felt something he hadn't felt in 5 long years. Peace. Real, honest, earned peace. The kind that comes from fighting for truth and winning. The kind that comes from protecting not just yourself, but others you'll never meet. The kind that comes from transforming victimhood into victory. Michael closed his eyes, and for the first time since Sarah's supposed death, he slept without nightmares. Without guilt. Without the weight of obligations that had never been real. He slept like a man who'd finally found his way home. And tomorrow, when he woke up, there would be no $300 payment hanging over his head. No lie to maintain. No ghost to feed. Just a father and daughter, building a life based on truth, trust, and the hard-won knowledge that love, real love, never asks you to destroy yourself to prove its worth. That was the lesson Sarah had taught him, though not in the way she'd intended. And it was a lesson Michael Carter would carry, and share, for the rest of his life.